everyone, and welcome to another session of Pragati Vichar Literature Festival's Authors Marathon. Our theme for the day is Voices of Change, Activism and Resilience, and the topic we will be talking about is resilience in the face of horror and crime. I am Atishay, the festival coordinator, and let me introduce you to the wonderful panel I have prepared for you today. The first on the panel, we are having Abhirup Dhar, who is a Kolkata-born best-selling author and has lived in various cities and towns. His books include Once Again with Love and Stories Are Magical, after which he delved into horror with Hold That Breath, which went on to the top of the Amazon bestseller charts for months since the very first day to its release and was among its best reads. His next books, The Belvoir Brook Haunting and Hold That Breath Part 2, topped the Amazon charts again. Abhirup has also endorsed by renowned filmmaker Vikram Bhatt. Midday calls him the most acclaimed name in Indian horror writing. Z5 has recently called him the biggest Indian horror writer in the country and one of the most renowned authors who keeps us holding our breath. As per Times of India, he is a distinguished figure in the realm of horror literature, celebrated for his mastery of the genre. Thank you so much, Abhirup, for joining us.
Thank you, Atishay. Thank you for the wonderful introduction.
Next on the panel, we are having Debarati Mukhopadhyay, who is one of the most celebrated authors of contemporary Bengali literature and an eloquent TEDx speaker, inspiring millions around the globe. At a remarkable age of 34 years, she has achieved literary acclaim with over 30 best-selling novels to her name, published by leading houses in India and globally by HarperCollins and Rupa Publications. Along with a government officer profession, her exceptional contribution to literature have earned her prestigious accolades, including the Indian Express Devi Award 2022, Shaila Jandana Puraskar 2024, Tagore Samman 2022, and the title of Literary Star of Bengal 2021. As a dedicated mother, Debarati seamlessly juggles her personal and professional life, inspiring others with her journey. With over 500,000 followers on social media, she continues to influence and uplift countless fans and readers across the globe. Thank you so much, Debarati, for joining us.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Atisha. Thank you.
So, I'm kind of intimidated for will having, such experienced authors with me, but let's hope for the best. So, my first question of the day for both of you is, so both of you write for diverse audiences, Abhirup in the horror genre and Debarati in contemporary Bengali literature. So, how do you ensure your storytelling resonates across different demographics and linguistic boundaries? Let's start with Debarati first.
In this 21st century, to be an author, to be a published author, and to be a sellable author, I think the first prerequisite is how can I create my target readers, and how can I refrain people from watching the 30-second reels or from watching the OTT to force them or to manipulate them to dive into my books. This is a real challenge for the authors because 50 or 60 years ago there was no such kind of entertainments. There was no much kind of entertainments in the middle class households. There were mere television for a whole locality, and all the old ladies or men, they used to read novels a lot than today. But now, with the advent of technology, now with the advent of the adequate amount of audiovisual content, to retain the reader's attention is one of the most challenging jobs that I always keep in mind. And to maintain that, I do research, I do vigorous research that in which topic, if I write, I can attract the people to my writing. That can be a historical topic, that can be a horror, that can be a social, any social kind of stigma, anything. The subject should be unique, because I don't believe in the old wine in a new bottle, because that is not working anymore in today's world. So, and also I first segment the audience, that is what should be the target audience for my particular work. If that is going to be a historical novel, there should be a story enough, should be a compact story, because not going to write a historical documentary, I'm going to write a fiction. So there should be a compact story with which the readers can relate them, with which readers can empathize them, the sentiments can be uh, involved, and also there is universal themes, so much universal themes and cultural sensitivity, also language localization, and a number of parameters I look up upon. But always I think that a variety of content, it's the key in today's world to retain the reader's base attractive.
Very valid points. Let's move to Avirup now.
So, firstly, Atishay, thank you to you, Frontlist Media, PVLF, Pragati, my literary agent Suhel Mathur of the Book Bakers, and Om Books International for this fantastic platform. And thank you for having me. So, like Debarati just mentioned, it's about not old wine in a new bottle anymore. What people are looking for now is content. In the last 4 5 years, we keep hearing this content. Naya kya hai? What's new now? What's different now? So I also focus on content, something different. When I write horror, it's about the kind of horror which I like to read or watch, or I've grown up reading or watching. Importantly, if I have to make horror sellable, because it's a very niche genre in India. In India, horror is not about the masses. It's about, I'd not say the classes as well, it's about a certain set of people who are very passionate about the genre. Unlike abroad or internationally, where horror is a passion. It's not really a passion here, right? People don't really go to watch a horror movie unless it's a horror comedy. People don't read horror books, to the tune of they read, say, a romantic book, a love story. So it's very important to make it massy. At the same time, cater to the elements of horror. So horror itself has got many subgenres, right? So as a horror buff, I know that it's got, say, gore, it's got splatterpunk, it's got body horror, it's got paranormal, supernatural, it's got a lot of things. In India, we mostly focus on two horrors only. One is the psychological part, the other is the supernatural part. We haven't delved into body horror here, or we haven't delved into gore or splatterpunk, something of that sort. So we can't make it a book or maybe a story which is not relatable. It's very important to relate with the characters. It's very important to relate with the location. So in my books, you'll always find, Atishay, that I have always mentioned Indian names, folks or characters who are very relatable. You have met them, maybe. You read my books and you come across my characters. You'll feel like you know them very well. You have grown up with them when you were in college, where you're working. He's like the guy sitting right next to you right now. Someone very relatable. That's important. And of course, I, being a avid traveler as well, right? And I select my locations very, very, very carefully. The location or the city where I set my story in is a character in itself. So mostly I write about different places, but I'm very much attached to Darjeeling because I grew up in Darjeeling, right? So Darjeeling forms the setting in most of my books or horror stories, right? And yeah, it's something which I'm very attached to myself. So something which I am related to, I can definitely write that. If I don't find myself attached to the characters or the setting or something of that sort, which I don't want to read myself, it's pointless, because if I don't enjoy my own writing, who will enjoy it? Right, Atishay?
Right.
So that's what is important, and it's in my mind all the time when I write a book. Relatability, a setting which you can relate with, characters you can relate with, and locations in India itself mostly. I don't resort to international locations unless there is a need. So there was a book like Ghost Hunter God of Tiwari where 4 or 5 cases were in Australia. So I did mention Australia, right? But normally I refrain from international locations. I stick to India itself.
Hmm. Wow. I have so many questions for both of you, but first, my first question would be, so both of you have written multiple books. So what draws you to the writing? And second part of this question is, both of your works have been adapted to OTT platforms as well, right? So how does your storytelling or how does your writing differs while case in the case of writing a book versus writing for OTT platforms? So let's start with Debarati first.
No, thank you for recognizing. Thank you for the appreciation, Atisha. But the fact is that I never write for any OTT series. After the publication of my novel, that has been adapted for OTT. So my prior concern was writing the novel for the readers only. And if you ask about the whether I am satisfied or not, see, there was a very famous writer in our Bengali literature called Narayan Shannal. He was a very erudite writer and he was a very famous engineer as well, and also he was a very famous novelist, especially famous for his well-researched thriller novels. So he quoted a very good statement that to criticize a OTT series after giving the consent of your own work is to criticize your uh, daughter's marriage, daughter's in-laws home, in the background of 100 years old back, the conventional in-laws home. So the fact is that I am giving my consent from my own interest, right? And I am giving it willfully. So there is no point of criticizing that whether it has been continuously sticking to my novel or not, because there are so many differences between a reading platform and the audiovisual platform. A particular scene, a particular incident might have been very enjoyable to read, but may not be good for the audiovisual scene, and the vice versa. So I think that is the director's discretion is enough, and I give faith on them. And I never write for OTT primarily because uh, by primitive concern, I'm a novelist. I'm not a script writer. And after my novel has been published, they have acquired the right and they have transferred it into the script.
Abhirup, your input on
So,
this?
Atisha, we have to understand one thing, movies and books, and I'm passionate about both this, okay? Both cinema and books are something which I'm very passionate about. They have got one common agenda, which is storytelling, but they are very different forms of storytelling. When you write a book, you have to have a different mindset altogether. When you write a script, it has to be a different mindset altogether. A script is more about the visual medium. You have to imagine things at a visual level. When you write a book, it's more about descriptions. So I'm also more of a novelist. I've written scripts and they are with prominent filmmakers in the Hindi film industry as we speak. In fact, yesterday was a great day for me, Atishay, because one of my web series got wrapped up, and it will be
Wow,
coming out on one
congratulations to
of the
you.
major OTT players in the first half of 2025. But having said that, I'm more of a novelist myself. I like to write books more than write scripts. I've written scripts. I would like to continue doing that, but I'd like to have more of my books coming out. So when I write my books, I don't have a movie in my mind, right? That's what happens when I come out with a book and I start talking about it, and then filmmakers get in touch with me and they want to adapt it. But they do take creative liberties, and I have nothing against them because when they write a script, which is based on one of my books, they have to look at the visual angle, right? They can't be about descriptions all the time, you know. So if I've got a 1 or 2 pages cut description describing the character, they cannot describe it in a web series or movie, right? So I have nothing against that. I've got a lot of fondness for that form of storytelling as well, right? But I'm more of a novelist. I'd love to stick around writing more of my books and then coming out with a lot of horror books because it's a genre which was neglected a few years ago. Nobody knew horror books existed in India. If I talk about English literature, right? Of course, me being a Bengali and I've grown up on a staple diet of Bengali books all my life since childhood. I know that some wonderful Bengali ghost stories were written. I grew up on them. But talking about the English literature, apart from Ruskin Bond, who mostly writes about sad ghosts, angry ghosts, happy ghosts, you have not really had a horror mainstream author. So I'd like to continue doing this, but at the same time, I'd also like to see my books being adapted on screen like they are. I'm very happy when that's happening. And scripts, yeah, kabhi kabhar, not always. I'd like to maybe write one script in 1 or 2 years, but maybe one book release in every year. for sure, Atisha.
Thank you so much. So, with that, let's move to my next question. So, your books challenge readers to confront horror and crime head on. How do you craft moments of strength and survival that lingers in readers' mind long after they finish the last page? So, let's start with Debarati first.
Yeah.
I first do concentrate over the creation of the layered characters that should be authenticated enough, and that should be to build such characters who feel real with their own flaws, fears, and personal stakes. Their journey from vulnerability to strength mirrors the human experience, everything. And also, I do concentrate it over the inner strength of superficial heroism, that is to focus on emotional resilience and resourcefulness rather than stereotypical bravery, making their survival rather inspiring and relatable. Also, I concentrate over to build the tension gradually, uh, pacing, that is to use suspense to create a slow burn where moments of terror and despair amplify the eventual what's say catharsis of the survival. Also, the atmosphere and the immersion to use the vivid sensory details, because detailing is the most important attributes of good thriller. Sensory details are to draw readers into the world, so they feel that every moment they are in that particular scene of the novel. Also, to showcase the moments where the character must confront some impossible choices. These decisions can reveal their growth, values, and survival instinct, leaving a lasting impression to the readers. And lastly, I focus on the emotional payoffs, like uh, even in the darkest moments of the novel, I like to give hint at the possibility of survival, or the possibility of the optimism or hope, or redemption, to keep the readers invested. And also to ensure, I also ensure the triumphs feel hard on, with characters paying an emotional or physical price for their survival. That's all. I maintain this few points while I have a very popular franchisee, very popular series, thriller series characters, Rudra and Priyam in Bengali literature, and surrounding them, six novels have already been published, and all of them are mostly in the national background. Like, there's a very sensational topic that there was an international terrorism attack on Taj Mahal, that whether Taj Mahal was a earlier was a Hindu temple or not, and I had to face vigorous threats for that novel while I was writing that novel. So I think this all the parts and parcel of my professional career, and that I just try to use the powerful visual and symbolic scenes that encapsulates the character's survival. Atishay.
Thank you so much. Abhirup, what are your insights into this?
So, I think, are we talking about resilience here? Resilience, right? So, by resilience, what do we mean, Atisha? We mean perseverance, right? Perseverance, matlab never give up spirit. So, I think horror is one genre which showcases resilience like no other genre apart from crime and thriller, right? So, if I talk about my storytelling, number one, I create a certain character who is very relatable, whom you get emotionally attached with, right? Whom you can understand very well. I mean, this guy is someone I know. You can understand his pain, his agony, his happiness, his sorrow, right? If I talk about my latest book, Karma, it's about this protagonist. It's not just about him, it's also about his wife, Sakshi. So you relate with these characters. So when you go through a certain situation in the storytelling, when these people are going through a certain problem or a certain issue, you certainly feel for them. So most of my books are about the three act structure which I follow, right? Number one is the setup, then comes the confrontation, then comes the resolution. So when I say the setup, the first few pages are about the setting, the atmospherics. I'm a sucker for atmospherics. I love, you know, anything, a movie which has got a good atmospheric background, the hills, the wind, whatever it is. And that's something which I also use in my books. I love that. The setting, the character development happens in the first few pages. So by the first 20, 25 pages, you are already there. You know, if I'm writing about Darjeeling, you are already in Darjeeling when you read the book. You're already sipping a cup of coffee with Karma and Sakshi, right? It's like that. That's what I feel. It's like visual storytelling. Then comes the second part of the three act structure, which is the confrontation. That's where the problem is, told to the readers that there is a problem. Kuch to gadbad hai yahan pe, there is a problem here, right? Now, when there is a problem, then you start feeling for these characters, Karma, Sakshi, or whatever it is. I'm talking about Karma, the recent book, hence Karma and Sakshi, right? And then comes the resolution. So by the time the resolution is given in the last 20, 25 pages, you totally understand what they have gone through, the kind of perseverance or the resilience they have showcased, so that the resolution now provided, good, bad, ugly, is a good payoff. So by the time my reader finishes that book, even if it's a sad ending, he or she will understand that the payoff is satisfying. A tragedy can also be satisfying, right? I mean, if I talk about Devdas, Sharat Chandra Chattopadhyay's Devdas, it was a tragedy. And he himself told that it was his worst book. He did not like that book. But it's a classic now, right? It's a tragedy. But you still love that payoff. You still love Devdas dying because you know that he was wrong, right? So, of course, I've not written a character like Devdas yet. That's eternal. Maybe someday I will. But yes, all my characters are like that. If not Devdas, definitely someone who might be right or wrong, but you'll definitely feel for the payoff or the character by the end of the book. Atisha.
Hmm.
Yeah. I also do agree with Abhirup. Resilience is kind of the defiance to succumb, even
Right,
when all seems lost. And it is
right.
found in very small acts of courage, a decision to take one more step, draw one more breath, or refuse to give in to despair. That, as a writer, we keep look upon.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right, Debarati.
So, actually, my follow-up question to both of you would be like, protagonists are definitely the main part of the novel or the story. How much emphasis do you guys put on side characters? Because personally, to me, side characters do play a lot of big role. A really big role when in terms of world building or the story setting. So, Abhirup, what are your inputs into this?
Very important here. Like you can't just have two protagonists or one protagonist and then you can just have sidekicks who are not even relatable. It doesn't make sense. It's like, you are maybe, with a group of friends and you're just talking to one pal. What about the other pals out there? Right? So, when you read a book, it's like it's like, when I write a book, I do have entertainment in my mind. If I read a book, I'd love to get entertained. I'd love to be engaged. I'd not love to pick up a book which after reading 4 5 pages, I'll be like, this is boring. It's like a get together of friends, like horror is something which is very charming. It's a genre which, uh, you know, as we speak, I'm having goosebumps. I can just recall those good old days when, there used to be power cuts, in my ancestral home, and maybe my grandmother used to tell me ghost stories. And, we used to have some muri makha. I don't know if you know that, but like maybe some kind of a jhal muri, and then, there is a power cut, there's a candlelight, and they were telling us ghost stories. So I believe horror is that kind of a charm. When I write a book, I feel that my readers should face what I faced when I used to grow up reading or hearing these ghost stories, when there used to be these power outages. And we used to have these brunches, Muri Maka and stuff, and maybe a candlelight at best to, show us some light, and then maybe your grandmother telling us stories. So if you don't have relatable characters, and then again, if you're with a group of friends and you're just talking to one friend, the other people are getting bored. What is the use? Right. So a book is like that only. When you read a book, you have to be engaged with all the characters out there.
Hmm.
It's not just about that protagonist. Has to be well developed characters. Very important. And even if it's not an important character, maybe I'll come up with a name which will strike. My name's also very peculiar. if you look at my books, you'll find very peculiar names. You'll not find very, common names. Like Atisha is a peculiar name. It's a different name. Huh? So
Right.
something of that sort. I'll pick up such. I never know. Maybe I'm talking to you now, and maybe I'm thinking of a character called Atisha. That's what I think of. But any which way, the point is that my character names are very different. It's not Ram Sham.
Right.
Not like that. I don't like to name people very, commonly. So my name's also very different. So even if it's a side character and maybe not very important, I'll give a very different name to it. So maybe a Nepali, uh, you know, Nepali servant will not be a Bahadur. Like if I talk about a book called Belvoy Haunting, it will not be a Bahadur. Because every Nepali is a Bahadur. You know, it will not be Bahadur. It will be something else. I forgot the
Hmm.
name right now. It's a very unimportant character in the book, but then it's a very different name. Fine. So I'll make that important as well. That character which is not important, I'll make that important as well when the reader reads it. So that's what I feel, Atisha.
Yeah. And on a side note, I would love to be in a book of yours, definitely.
You never know, because when I heard your name first, it was like different. Yeah, this name is different. Never heard it before.
Right.
It's a very good, sophisticated word in Bengali literature. Otishoy means excess, something
Yeah,
which is excess
Right.
than the required,
right.
and we pronounce it as Otishoy.
Otishoy. But then we don't have many Bengali people named Otishoy. I've hardly
Yeah,
come across
yeah,
any
no.
Bengali.
It's a very uncommon. I have never heard
Yeah, I never
anyone
heard.
who has the name of
Right.
Otishoy,
So
right?
I do get
that's
that a lot actually, and it's widely like mainly used in Jainism actually. So
okay.
Okay.
yeah, and like the
It's a
major
nice name.
reason
You
is
never know. Maybe
social for it.
Debarati will write a Bengali book with your name, as a
Right.
character, and I'll write a book as
Yeah,
well.
definitely.
Then we'll have another get
He
together
endorses.
once. Yeah, true.
Perfect, perfect. So yeah, let's move to Debarati now. Debarati, what is your emphasis on side characters?
Yeah, side characters are like you can't build a building without the cements. Only with the brick you can't build the entire building. No, so the cements which will stick the bricks, the perfect combination of cement, sand, all will stick the bricks. Like that, only the side characters they build the story, the compact story, also with the back stories. There is also a kind of boring way that some some writing, some novel strategies are to start from the backstories, but that might have some boring boredom can create to the readers. So I prefer it that to weave the story in such a way that is through memories, the narrative through the memories of the side characters, through the dialogues of the side characters, or the actions of the side characters, that that will construct the story, that will construct the entire structure of the novel.
So with that, let's move to my next question. So Abhirup, your work often includes paranormal elements, and Debarati, your work blends historical and social context. So how do you strike a balance between reality and imagination to keep your stories compelling yet credible as well? Abhirup, why don't you start first?
Um, Atisha, I think horror is very much relatable and it happens. Yeah, like I'll tell you the biggest horror which we all faced was 4 years ago. It was the pandemic, right? उससे बड़ा horror हो सकता है क्या? I don't think so. Right. So
Right.
I think I personally feel that during the pandemic, most of us sat at home and took notice of a lot of things. See, horror is not about bhoot, pret, churels, spirits, witches only. It's a very vast genre. You know, it's
Right.
also about humans. Humans can be scarier than ghosts, you know, or the pandemic, for example. When we were going through the pandemic, so many deaths happening. I was in Mumbai, at that point of time. I was living in Mumbai at that point of time, and Mumbai was the worst hit. People were dying all around, and we kind of got resilient. I'll use that term again because it was a part of the discussion and it's a part of the topic as well. And apart from the resilience we showcased, we also understood one thing consciously or subconsciously: horror does happen. you know so people who are sitting at home, they probably started reading books other than the romance and the love stories variety. because there was a lot of time, They started watching Netflix more often. They started watching more shows with darker themes, right? And they started understanding that it's not just about this genre which I like. I'll also explore other genres. So for someone like me, I think it helped a lot because people started opening up to other genres during this pandemic, right? And when you overcome such a horrible phase like pandemic, you know that it is relatable. Because see, let me tell you very honestly, love is definitely something which is very relatable, right? So that's why everyone loves love stories. I also love love stories if it's well written, right? But fear is one of the top five psychological needs. It may not be a need, but then it's definitely out there. You cannot ignore fear, right? You don't want to be scared, but then that's a different thing. But you will be scared. It's out there. It's among the top five, I'd say, emotions, if I have to put it that way. So the sooner you understand that, the better it is for horror, right? And if I talk about my books, I definitely have a lot of horror, but then I also have some relatable characters and some reality checks. It's not just about spirits and churels and tantrics. I'm really sorry, but I prefer the kind of horror where I like to find fear in silent circumstances more than scary faces, Atisha. So that's about me.
Right. And I think as a society as a whole, our appetite for content is constantly evolving.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
we don't want a simple story now, like complex stories with
You don't.
a lot of intricacies into the plot woven,
Hmm.
and cliffhangers and lot of things. So let's hear from Debarati as well. What are your inputs into this?
Can you please repeat the question again, please?
So yeah, definitely. How do you strike a balance between reality and imagination to keep a stories compatible, like basically compelling yet credible?
That is mainly applicable for my historical novels specifically because I have written a number of huge volumed historical novels which are quite popular in Bengal, and some of them have already been translated in English and published by some of the esteemed publishers. So, I think striking a balance between reality and imagination is a key to crafting stories that are both compelling and credible. For me, this process is about respecting the historical facts, the social truths, while using the imagination to fill up the gaps, create connections, and breathe life into the narrative. Like this is a very delicate balancing. Like I wrote a novel about the first Bengali female doctor, Dr. Kadambini Ganguly. She was the lady who was an epitome of enlightenment, women empowerment. But to write a novel about Kadambini Gangotpadhyay, I had to create some imaginary characters. Unless and until I create any imaginary characters, I can't write the fiction. No, it should be the historical documentary. So I begin with meticulous research. I dive into the historical records, personal diaries, and academic texts to understand the era's events. Also, I have written a novel about the cellular jail, the revolutionary activities, the cellular jail in Andaman. Also, I wrote a novel, historical novel, based on a very ancient kingdom of Vishnupur Malla kingdoms, and I research and the academic the available text to understand the era's events, culture, and social dynamics. This form the foundation of my narrative. Now I ensure that the backdrop, the locations, the political climate, the societal norms reflects the real world as faithfully as possible, but there is no compulsion because I am no historian. This is the first disclaimer that I am no historian. If you want to know the history, you read the history books. There are plenty of historical resources. If you want to get entertained, if you want to get entertained in the cover of a historical essence, then you read a historical novel. So I often create imaginations to fill the gaps. Like history often focuses on major events, living the lives of the ordinary people in the shadows. I do concentrated over the ordinary lives, the subaltern, like that. In the late 19th century, there are lakhs of people who were deported to Latin America from India. Though that time slavery was already been abolished, still the people were in the name of indentured laborers. They were deported, and no no one wrote for them. So I wrote a very well researched novel about those shadowy people, the ordinary people. They are completely got oblivion in history. And also I create fictional characters who interact with the real historical figures, or navigate the significant events, adding a layer of personal drama. That is completely imaginative. Personal drama and relatability. Like, suppose I'm writing a novel about a nationalist movement, so I can create a character of a young widow, how she will struggle in her life, how to defy the patriarchal norms that might intersect with the rise of a nationalist movement, intertwining the personal and historical narratives. And also I do respect the spirit of history, not just the facts, like the emotional truths. Beyond dates and events, I focus on capturing the essence of the time, its emotions, struggles, and aspirations. And also, I try to avoid anachronism, because while imagination plays a role, I avoid modern values or behaviors that would feel out of place in the historical context. So anachronism, I mostly like to avoid. That is a mismatch of the time, mismatch of the date, kind of. I try to avoid to keep the novel reliable enough. And also I use the imagination as the metaphor. I often use imaginative elements, dreams, visions, or supernatural hints as metaphors for historical or social themes, adding depth without compromising the realism. Also I use the layered narratives. This blending of real and surreal allows readers to engage with the story on multiple levels, multiple side plots, multiple subplots, and appreciating both its factual basis and as well as the creative depth. That's all, Atisha.
Hmm. Thank you so much for such an interesting insight. With that, I would also this is my last question for the general panel. So basically, like you both have written a lot of novels, and there's a appetite of you to keep on writing. So how do you deal with the writer's block? I'm sure that questions comes to you a lot, but I still want to hear that. So let's start with Aviru first.
It happens. Writer's block happen. I feel that if someone tells you that writer's block does not happen, he or she is lying. It does happen. It happens when I overthink. So I'm a very self-critical writer, Atisha. Fine. Before the book is out in the market and people start telling me if the book is good or if it's better than the last book, if it's as per the expectations. I personally feel that a writer understands where he or she is going right or wrong while writing the book itself. Fine, I'll be very honest about this. And every writer or every author worth his or her salt should agree here. Fine. So when I overthink that, this is not happening as per the expectations of myself, it's not that, when I write a particular scene, if I'm not getting scared myself, or if I'm not being able to relate myself, why will the reader be able to relate with it or be scared later? When that happens, I start overthink. And then when I overthink, it does take me a few days to come out of it. So when I have a writer's block, I take a break, which is a well-deserved break for a few days, and I get back to it with a different, mindset. The different mindset with a different view, you know. And yeah, a lot of edits happen here. Like there are times when I kind of write 4 5 chapters and then I go back again and I start from scratch, you know, so that it becomes a little more better. So writer's block happens, and it's quite common as per me. It does happen. In fact, when you have a writer's block, you should take a break, which is a well-deserved break, because if you overthink a lot, it will not happen unless and until you go with the flow. Unless and until you enjoy your writing, you'll not be able to write a good book, Atisha.
Hmm. Debarati, what are your insights into this?
Yeah, I also feel the same exactly. Dealing with writer's block is an inevitable part of the creative journey of any author. But I see it as an opportunity rather than an obstacle. As I'm not a full-time author, I'm a government officer by profession, and I'm an ardent reader, I'm a voracious reader. When I can realize that I don't like to write, I read a lot, and I engage myself. That is writer's block is basically a signal that something needs attention, be it my ideas, my mindset, or even my routine. So I try to identify the cause, and sometimes it can be mental fatigue because writer's block can be just an exhaustion. In such cases, I step back, happily rest and recharge, because I juggle between my duty as a mom, duty as a government officer, also duty as a regular author. And as my novels are quite sellable, there are huge pressure for the publishers. In Bengali literature, there is something unique. I don't know you know that or not. In English literature, writers basically generally write one novel in a 2 years. But in Bengali literature, we are forced to write at least 2 to 3 novels in a year. So that is very much exhaustive. But I surrender happily to my publisher that this is not a manual job like to clean the utensils or to wash the clothes. This is something which comes with the mind. And I step back, I rest, I recharge, and creativity thrives when the mind is well rested. No, creativity can't be thrive when your mind is very much in the eccentric position. Also, at times I need to get it right, stifles my flow. Like I remind myself that the first draft does not have to be perfect; it just has to exist. And uh, after that, uh, I I slow down. Sometimes I slow down. I give myself time to write the second or third draft. Also, when I feel lost in a story, it's often because I have not mapped out the next steps. Revisiting my outline or brainstorming new possibilities helps. And also, I try to change the environment. I try to get a small vacation, any kind of physical space to spend time with my baby, to spend time in traveling. I'm a very avid traveler, and reading books, watching films, or even listening to music in the same genre or theme when I'm exploring can reignite the inspiration. And when I think that gradually and slowly I am becoming normal, gradually my mind is calming down, then I start small with a very small free writing with absolute no pressure, like tackle a different scene or a very just small free writing on my own interest. No, nothing fiction, any non-fiction activities I also write without repetition. So repetition is the most a negative thing a writer should avoid. So I never believed on repetition, and I always want to seek a perspective, and just reading out books and spending the leisure time so that the fatigue can be burned out, the full resting, and the writer's block automatically gets vanished as of now.
Right, definitely. And coming from a experienced author perspective, I would also want both of you to address basically the aspiring writers or the authors who are amongst the audience. What would be your single piece of advice to them?
I think to be an author in today's generation, first you have to be a very good reader. There is a very famous dialogue in Bengali literature. I can't recall who told this, but obviously a famous writer wrote this, that if you read at least 100 pages, you have achieved the eligibility of write one page. Because reading is not the knowledge gathering, not only the knowledge acquisition, also the you can learn the writing strategy, writing pattern, the structure of how to form a story, how to bind a story. So I think first the prerequisite to be an author is to be a good reader, and also the second thing is to stay focused. It is not something like hot kachuris. Book is not a kind of puri sabji that is it has to be sold out in one overnight. Okay, it's a slow and gradual process. You have to be patient, you have to be focused, and you have to be creative. And third, uh, you should be optimistic enough that if you have the quality in your writing, definitely your writing will be remembered. And always prefer quality over quantity. That's all.
Right. Abhirup, your advice.
So I think most importantly, my suggestion to aspiring authors will always be that write what you want to write. Don't write because something is in trend. You know, in English, it's like mythology was in trend because of Amish. So many people started writing mythology, right?
Right.
Or maybe Chetan Bhagat came out with 5 point someone, and many people jumped on the bandwagon. Like
Hmm.
some did well, some did
Right.
not do well, whatever it is. But write what you want to write. It's very important to have your own style, of writing. If you don't want to write mythology, it's okay. If it's selling, it's okay. You write something else. If it does well, well and good. And don't have commercials in your mind when you write. It's not important to have the commercials in your mind. Because if you write thinking of how many copies the book will sell, eventually you will become a marketer and not a writer. End of the day. Read a lot, like Debarati just said, very important. So for me, I was an avid reader ever since I was a child. So that helped me a lot. I used to read a lot, Bengali or English, I used to read a lot. So that helped because that foundation helps when you start writing your own books and stories. And persevere, very important. Resilience, like you said. So I think that's the theme of the show. But resilience is something which authors have to incorporate in their day-to-day, operations, day-to-day life, because it's not easy. It's not a bed of roses. It's not like, things will be hunky-dory if you write a book and it will become a bestseller the next day. My first book did not do well, very honestly. It was a self-published book. It was a rom-com, and it was not even with the traditional publishing houses, not even with the Rupa or Om or Westland or Penguin, which I'm working with now, Rupa, Om, Westland, and others. Yeah, it was a self-published book. It was a rom-com. I did not know how to market a book. I had written that manuscript during a 4 months break between my MBA and my first job, and just for the sheer joy of it, thought to just write the book and keep it to myself. A few years later, I showed it to a few friends. They said, "You should become an author, yeah?" I said, "Arey, wow, great. So let me talk to a few publishers," and all. Nobody wanted to take it at that point of time. There was a traditional publishing house which wanted to take it, but they wanted to, I'll not name the publishing house. It's a big publishing house, but they wanted to extract some money from me, and a very good amount of money. So I went for self-publishing, which was much more cheaper at that point of time. My first book bombed, and I have no qualms in accepting my failure. If you do not know how to accept your failures, how will
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
accept
Very
your
good point.
successes later? So
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
very important to be resilient. Very important
Also, I
to.
wish to add a funny anecdote in this regard. That is Rabindranath Tagore. We all know about him. He used to he used to take the writing as a complete routinary task. Every day he used to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning, and after having breakfast, he used to write in a garden, in an open table and chair. He used to write, and he very disciplined in a very disciplined way. He write for 8 hours every day. That was his routine, whether there is writer's block, whether there is interest or not. That was a strict discipline. And one day a thing happened, incident happened. A tribal lady used to go in front of him to her work, to her daily work. Then one day she asked that, "You don't have any work? When I go to work, I see that you are writing. When I am coming, when I'm returning back from my work, I am watching that you are writing. You फिर तुझको कोई काम नहीं देता है क्या? Why are you writing all the day? So what I want to tell, writing is a serious task, and we should practice is like a knife. A knife get sharp with practice. So practice is the inevitable portion to be an author. That's it.
Very true, Debarati.
Yes.
I completely second that point.
Very well
Absolutely.
said. So, while I do have a lot of questions for both of you, and I do want this conversation to keep going on, I'll quickly wrap this discussion with a few individual questions for both of you. So, my first question would be for Abhirup. So, your journey from romance to horror has been fascinating. How do you manage the pressure of living up to high expectation with every new release?
uh, so I'll be honest, okay? Like I do not set expectations for myself. The publishers do have expectations. So when I got into horror per se, like my first two books were not horror. My first was a rom-com, then the second book was an anthology. Usme there was a horror story. It was during writing that book and that horror story that I realized that there are no horror authors around. And this is a genre which I dearly love. I love it since childhood. So let me get into horror. So the third book was Hold That Breath, which was horror. And again, an anthology. Number one, publishers do not go for anthologies. Number two, publishers don't go for horror. Fine. And yet I wrote that book without having a publisher at that point of time. Right. So, and it did very well. It was also priced at a very low rate, 90 rupees only. So that was also a reason. And then word of mouth publicity spread like wildfire among horror, fans and buffs. And Hold That Breath was a buzzword, right? It became a viral word for horror buffs. Then I came up with The Belvoir Brook Haunting, which released during the COVID pandemic. Fine. Now, that was, as per me, a better written book than Hold That Breath, very honestly. But since the pandemic was there, right, Amazon was not delivering. So the only option I had was Kindle. And it sold like hotcakes on Kindle, but paperback was a utter failure for obvious reasons, right? But
Hmm.
as per me, The Belvoir Brook Haunting is a better written book than Hold That Breath. But if I have to go by readers, Hold That Breath is a much better, right?
Hmm.
I'll be honest about it. Then came Hold That Breath too, and things happened. It was after Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari that the expectation settings reached a different crescendo. Now every book I write will be compared with Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari, right? Which is not going to happen because Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari was about India's first or India's pioneering paranormal investigator, right? It was about a real life personality, right? On which the web series has been wrapped up as well a few days ago as we speak. I wrote the sequel, Hauntings, after that itself. Hauntings was about the cases done by Indian Paranormal Society after Gaurav Tiwari's death, right? So it did well, but then not to the tune of the expectations of Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari because that was about Gaurav Tiwari, right? And now people are expecting me to only write non-fiction because I've written Hauntings and Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari. But it's fiction which fuels my imagination. Fiction will definitely come first, and hence I've written Karma, which came out now. And now Karma is again a buzzword. Now, tomorrow, when I come up with my next books, it will be compared with Karma, right? Or if I come up with a non-fiction, it will be compared with Ghost Hunter Gaurav Tiwari. So the benchmarks will be set and broken. But the point is that will I be happy with the book or not? And as a writer, I know which book I have written is very dear to me. All my books are very dear to me, but I know which one of them or which two of them have given me the most creative satisfaction. So I don't set expectations for myself. But yes, since now it's about selling the books, it's being commercially viable, which I was not earlier. I used to not even market my books earlier, now I do market my books. I'm learning a thing or two about marketing and all, right? But the point is that it's about writing, no? And what better expectation than to be satisfied with your own work, right? So when I'm
Hmm.
satisfied with my own work, I'm like, okay, fine, this is a good book I've written. Now let it sell, let it not sell, that's a different thing. I'll take care of it later, with a pinch of salt. But any which way, now there are so many avenues of, reaching out, Atishay, it's not just about the book selling, it's about maybe the web series happening or the movie happening or so many other things now which have come up because, a lot of dearth of good script writers in the Hindi film industry, right, or in the film industry itself overall in India. And that is why a lot of focus is now growing on book adaptations, which is the case internationally. And I personally feel that this will be a good step for the film industry as well. So, yes, expectation setting, it's okay, but if it's reaching out via various mediums and people are reading it or maybe watching the web series or movie when it's coming out and they are happy about it, it's okay. I do not depend on the book sales for a living. I'm also a working professional somewhere and I'm also a full-time writer. I cannot call myself a part-time writer. It's at nights that I write and in the weekends that I write. But expectations for me is importantly if I'm happy with the book. If I'm happy with the book, it's okay for me. Atisha.
Hmm. Very well said. Thank you so much, Abhirup. With that, let's move to Debarati. So, with over 30 best-selling novels to your name, how do you consistently craft compelling narratives that resonate with such a wide audience?
Basically, it is just a result of passion, discipline, what I have already mentioned, and an understanding of what readers seek. With every story I write, I focus on weaving authentic emotions, engaging characters, and universal themes that connect with the diverse audiences. Like, start with a strong emotional core, relatability, building complex, relatable characters, flawed and human like characters with all the strengths as well as vulnerabilities, the growth arcs, and also there should be a mastery of the art of storytelling. There is I open with gripping scenes or questions that immediately draw readers into the story. Also, whether it's the slow build of a historical drama or the first phase of a crime thriller, I carefully craft a rhythm to keep readers engaged. Also, I try to blend the reality with the imagination, grounding the story in real emotions, settings, or historical details, which ensures the authenticity, believability, and also I use my creative freedom to create twists, fictionalize what ifs, or amplify the stakes, ensuring the story feels fresh and engaging. And I understand and evolve with my audience. That is, I pay attention to what my readers love about my books. I have a huge readers base in social media. I've been followed by like 5 to 6 lakhs of readers, and they often share what they want to read from my books. And also the cultural depth to ensure those elements shine. And while respecting the reader's preferences, I also experiment with new themes, new genres, or new formats to surprise them and delight them. Like last year, I wrote spiritual novel. I never wrote a spiritual novel before that. I have written crime, I have written horror, I have written social novel, historical novel, juvenile novel, but spiritual novel I never wrote. And I was quite skeptical that whether the readers will approve it or not. But to surpassing my expectation, that was well appreciated. So a shift from the traditional thrillers to the psychological horror or this kind of spiritual novels allowed me to explore a new kind of fear while retaining my signature storytelling style. Atishay.
Yeah. With that, thank you so much, Abhirup and Debarati, for joining us for this discussion and sharing your valuable expertise and insights with us. From the behalf of PVLF and Frontless family, I would also like to extend an invitation to both of you. If you were to be in Delhi on 3rd or 4th of February, please join us at Sundar Nursery for the offline version of the festival. And thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Atisha, for the
Thank you,
invitation to the
Debaruti.
PVLF. Yeah,
Wonderful
thank you, Abhirup, too.
co-paneling with you. Thank you, Atisha, for
Yeah,
having me.
yeah,
And let's stay connected. Take care. Bye.
yeah, sure, sure. Okay, okay. Bye.